Hello, everybody, and a very hearty welcome to today's talk. It is not a very comfortable option for me to look into the camera and speak. Seems as if I'm talking to a blank space. But nonetheless, we are all getting used to this new normal, as we are calling it, and also adapting ourselves to new modes of communication and, most importantly, new modes of sustaining relationships. Yes. Without further ado, I would like to directly plunge into today's topic, and a very sensitive one at that: queer lives in quarantine. This stay at home mandate has brought all of us face to face with several issues which we have not paid enough attention. But now we are compelled to take a relook at them, having to deal with certain aspects which might not have surfaced in this manner had not there been an obligatory lockdown. So, this unprecedented condition of existence, which is almost existentialist, has made many of us more alert to our privileges. Also, at the same time, the torment of being underprivileged in terms of class, caste, gender, or physical and intellectual disability has become more pronounced. In this short video, I'll draw your attention to the plight of the LGBTQ plus population, a community of people who were already oppressed and marginalized in several ways. And a pandemic of this gigantic proportion is bound to, make an already vulnerable community more susceptible than ever before. Uh, in fact, when I was mulling over this video, thinking of doing this, I faced a very interesting question. Somebody asked me, why are you even claiming that LGBTQ plus population has been differently affected by the pandemic? Well, a very, very pertinent question, and I was glad that the question was asked. Yes, the novel coronavirus has been remarkably indiscriminating in its choice of victims. It has got to everyone, regardless of class, caste, religion, gender, nation. But then it is not so much about the nature of the virus. It is more about the social havoc it has wrought, whereby life has come to a standstill. And this has indeed affected the LGBTQ plus population remarkably differently, which I'm sorry to say may not be easily intelligible to a more privileged heteronormative population. Now, this pandemic has been life altering for everyone, but the way it has impacted the LGBTQ plus community across the globe is worth probing. The coming years, I'm sure, would see the emergence of more nuanced, data based research, but the conversation around the issue needs to start right away. Activists, social groups, NGOs, help centers, and several members of the community have already begun to come up with very, very interesting stories, in fact, heart rending stories. I would begin by referring to a report by the Trevor Project, a US based LGBTQ plus charity which runs a suicide hotline for the people of the community. And it shows an unprecedented upsurge of SOS calls from its members. Suicidal tendencies are on the rise, for sure, because of the hostile situations in which LGBT people are locked up. It could be demoralizing for queer people to survive without their community, which, though available online, is no longer able to provide emotional support as it could in more normal times. Many being locked up with, homophobic parents, siblings are finding it difficult to survive. Abuses, physical violence, and even constant pressure to marry a member of the opposite sex are taking a toll on everybody's mental health that way. In fact, very interestingly, charities such as Albert Kennedy Trust have advised young people to, and I quote, press pause on coming out until such times when coming out could be easier, more favorable times. All of this coupled with tremendous apprehensions of, returning to a changed world where there may be lesser number of jobs on the offer are also taking a toll on the mental health of those who did not have a steady income so far. A particularly grim reality is being inhabited by those who have gender dysphoria. They have been inconvenienced beyond imagination. They are in constant need of specialized care, professional therapy, regular conversations, and social meetups with their peer group. These are absolutely mandatory for them to survive. And if they're now forced to inhabit a queer negative space, which some of them are, it is emotionally and psychologically debilitating for them. Those who have left their homes long back and have not yet found stable homes are at their vulnerable worst. Um, those who have taken a step further, for example, like those who are contemplating sex reassignment surgery or are already in the middle of the process, have found themselves in an unimaginably dismal situation as well. They need, again, constant gender affirmative care, which incidentally has been classified as non essential by the government at this hour. The hospitals being overwhelmed with COVID 19 infected patients, surgeries of this nature would be indefinitely postponed. And the very thought is devastating for those, trans men, trans women who are in the process of transition already. And this is causing tremendous mental and, psychological distress. Um, in a more specific Indian context, trans women who earn their livelihood through challa or collecting alms on public transports, at traffic signals, etc., have been rendered penniless altogether under this compulsory lockdown situation. Also, those who are associated with sex work have been hit very hard. Now, touch becoming a taboo in this pandemic, it would be impossible for sex workers to make their both ends meet, and we cannot tell till when. It cannot be predicted now. So the situation is rather disappointing on various levels. And in fact, I would like to point out that when the lockdown became the state dictated norm to contain the pandemic, and there was possibly no other feasible cautionary measure that could be adopted, what escaped many of us is that home where we were asked to stay may not always ensure security to everybody. Countless members of the trans community inhabit spaces in which they live in close proximity to each other, where social distancing is not really a practicable option. This in turn stresses the importance of looking at the intersectionality of class and sexuality, in mapping victimization during the corona pandemic. Also, as pointed out by Kolkata based trans activist Ranjita Sinha, who is also the founder of ATHB, that no special care has been taken to screen and test trans men and women who are highly vulnerable to the virus, for they occupy spaces which cannot be always viably quarantined. They can't be. So, testing is very, very necessary here, which has not been followed. Um, Looking at a country like the US also at this moment, US which has been very badly hit by the virus, many homeless LGBTQ young adults rely on what is known as the LGBTQ community centers, and there are like 260 such community centers across the country which look after their vital needs and general well-being. So during the pandemic, however, many of the centers have reduced their hours and services or closing and are closing their doors completely to protect staff and visitors. So, although video conferencing is still on in many of these centers, they are not being able to guarantee protection. You know, I would give you an example of Detroit's Ruth Ellis Center, which is a drop in center, a health clinic, and an overnight shelter also, and it has also suspended many of its services. Before the lockdown, the drop in center used to offer hot meals and showers and professional skills training also to LGBT people. Now the center opens only to distribute groceries from the front door because, because of the fear of the contagion. Um, and the closing down of these centers has proved to be a severe blow to homeless LGBTQ plus people who were heavily dependent on these shelters for their survival. Also, a report from Japan drew my attention and it underlined another potential risk the pandemic has exposed those who are wary of coming out. Yes, if infected by the virus, the possibility of being outed as a queer person increases manifold because doctors are tracing the root of the infection, where you got it, who you met, where did you go. So they try to map your entire route, and uh, in this process, the infected queer person might not be in a position to reveal information because that bears the fear of being outed and also outing others who do not want to be outed. So this is an issue which is very, in my understanding, is a very unique to the community, particularly to those who want to remain inside the closet. Now let us return to India once more and look at same-sex couples who have gone into quarantine with one another. Since civil rights are still not available and same-sex marriage is still not legal in the country, despite the partial reading down of Section 377 of the IPC, same-sex couples infected by the virus may have to encounter a problem which is generally which will not be faced by heterosexual couples of the same class and same of comparable economic affluence. If one of the same sex partners falls ill, infected by the virus, the other partner might find it difficult to go through the admission process at hospitals, which require a blood relation or a legally married spouse to sign the admission forms. It does not mention partners. No, the word partner is not mentioned there. Now, if the biological family of the infected partner is not available, and in most cases it is likely to be unavailable, particularly because of the lockdown, travel may not be possible, the formalities at the hospital may not be easy to complete by the partner who is not infected. This partner at the most can pretend to be a family friend in order to sign the form. Also, this may lead to outing of the couples, which may not be desirable as well. Connected to this issue is something very vital at this moment. The joint medical insurances for same-sex couples are not available. How can it be available? I mean, if they do not have the right to marry legally, then of course there's no question of joint medical insurances. Although there are some corporate houses which do offer that kind of facility, but generally it is not available. So if both the partners are not financially stable or maybe financially stable independent of each other, let us consider a unique situation like partners A and B. A is medically insured, B is not medically insured. Now if B gets infected by the virus, then A, despite being medically insured, cannot use that to meet B's hospital expenses. Now, heterosexual couples are protected by medical insurances which only cover dependents such as legally married spouses, their biological children, adopted children too, parents, and even in laws. But this facility is not available to same sex couples. Now, one may point out here that this kind of a situation can happen anytime. It is not like unique to the pandemic or anything like that. But in the current emergency like situation, uh, it makes same sex couples much more vulnerable than in more normal times. Now, this is another fight which needs to be fought. Reading down of Section 377 was perhaps just the beginning, you know. There are so many other things which need to be discussed, which need to be looked into, which need to be fought for. So the battle has just begun. To to end this talk, let me return to a book by Judith Butler, one of the pioneer queer theorists of contemporary times. The book was called Precarious Life: The Powers of Mourning and Violence, which was published in 2004. And I quote from the book: "The body implies mortality, vulnerability, agency, but also to touch and to violence, and bodies put us at risk of becoming the agency and instrument of all these as well. Although we struggle for rights over our own bodies, for which we struggle are not quite ever only our own." Such wonderfully profound lines. The struggle to own one's body, a queer body in this case, has become even more difficult at a time of a global health emergency, given that LGBTQ people already has a very, very precarious life on the peripheral zones of society, neglected, oppressed, shamed, battered. The degree of this precarity has gone up by 1,000 notches at this moment. And it's time we took care and we took note. The realities I talked about here, are harsh and may be depressing for many of the viewers, because all of us, are going through a certain situation. But these realities cannot be ignored, because if we ignored them, we would not be able to alter them, right? So it is important we talked about them. In the description box of this video, there are links to more articles, websites, online portals for more information, more awareness. And also, if you want to step forward and help LGBTQ plus people in need, you can get in touch with the contacts mentioned. And to end with, stay well, stay very safe, and a lot of love and sunshine from me. And thanks a lot for listening in. It was an honor talking to every one of you. Thank you so much.